in truth, I actually think this is a reasonably flawed car, but I haven't told him too much, so hopefully you'll see whether he agrees with me or not.
Hello everybody, I'm Jack. Welcome to number 27. Well, recently, some of you will have seen that I did a video comparing my current Alfa 147 GTA to my old M135i. For me personally, the Alfa definitely won out. It wasn't the better car, but it was the more interesting car to drive. So if you are a keen driver, if you're really interested, then for me the Alfa was just the one to have. Now, I've bored you all to death with the fact that most modern cars are just incredibly dull to drive. They certainly are for me, and that's because the involvement and the feel has been taken away. I think almost any modern hatch that I would have tried against the Alfa would have lost against the criteria that I set for a car that I find interesting. So what are we doing today? Well, I'm going to give the Alfa a better shot against the original 1 Series. This is a 130i. It doesn't have a turbocharged engine. This is a manual, and I'm hoping it's going to have, it's going to give the Alfa a better run for its money in terms of driver enjoyment. Now, I could spend a couple of minutes here talking about this car, but what I will do instead is I'm going to invite that walking car encyclopedia, who's my friend JayEmm, to come and tell you about it.
Hi everybody, taking a little bit of a holiday from my own channel to appear with Jack, a good friend and a man with excellent taste in cars. I've got a bit of a soft spot for his Alfa, I must admit, but I think the BMW does have a lot going for it. Now, in truth, I actually think this is a reasonably flawed car, but I haven't told him too much, so hopefully you'll see whether he agrees with me or not. But what exactly is this? Well, it's a 2007 130i. The chassis code for this particular car is an E81, because this is the 3-door variant. Now, I particularly wanted a 3-door car. The vast majority of these you'll find are going to be the 5-door. Now, the 130i is actually a reasonably rare car, and at the time BMW's model lineup was a little bit confused. This was the fastest, most powerful hatchback 1 Series that you could get. However, the 135 did already exist, but only in coupe and convertible form. Bizarrely, there wasn't a 130i coupe or convertible. You get a 125i, which actually had the exact same engine, just detuned a little bit. This car is more or less entirely standard. It's got over 150,000 miles on the clock, and it is, I think, as it came out of the factory. This particular one is a very highly specified car, and I've actually owned this car twice now, because I had it, sold it, regret it immensely, spent a long time trying to find one like it, and couldn't, and luckily I then managed to buy it back. The colour is Le Mans Blue, which is reasonably commonplace in the 1 Series. The 3-door bit is fairly rare, and this car is a facelift. So they only did the 3-door in a facelift, and there are a few things that were better about the facelift, a few things that were worse. The interior is a little bit nicer on the facelift. You get a better infotainment system, and this car has iDrive in it, which was an optional extra at the time. However, you also got electric steering in this, where you got hydraulic in the earlier cars. But you got a better sound system, so it has upgraded hi-fi. It's not the top end one, but it's better than the usual rubbish BMW stick in their cars. You've got these regular M Sport 18-inch alloys. It's an M Sport car. It does sit like this on its normal suspension. The only modification is the fitment of a BMW M Performance back box. So it sounds just a little bit fruitier than standard, but it's nowhere near as raspy and noisy as the Alfa. The interior has the sort of fullest leather really that you could get in the 1 Series. Has electric seats, which again were an option. You have adaptive headlights at the front. The whole thing weighs just under 1,500 kilos. I really quite like it, and I've got it as my regular daily. Like the Alfa, no limited slip diff on these as standard, and BMW, to my knowledge, never offered one as a factory upgrade. You just couldn't get one, and it is something of an Achilles heel on this car. But you can do a lot with them. Birds, for example, can do a whole suspension overhaul, which includes new anti-roll bars, new dampers, new springs, the works. This has had some M3 control arms put on it, because one of the benefits of this 1 Series platform is it shares a heck of a lot of parts with the 3 Series of the time. And because it shares parts with the 3 Series, that means it also shares parts with the M3. So all that's really done here is it's just refreshed a load of the bushes and given the car just a little bit more camber. For the purposes of this test, honestly, I don't think the difference is that major, but it should hopefully have improved performance a little bit, and in future there's a whole bunch of other stuff that I want to do. But here now, this car I think is a reasonably good example of a used 130i.
So I've already done a video where I talk about the GTA, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but a few key things that you have to know. When this car first came out, everyone was madly excited about it because it had the legendary Busso V6 at the front in a package that looked really rather tasty. It was met with mixed reviews. Everybody loved the engine, of course, and loved the sort of sense of fun that the car had, but it was badly flawed. First of all, Alfa released it without the limited slip differential. So in a car with 250 horsepower, lots of torque, front drive, that was a mistake. They also had front discs that were too small. And generally, the suspension setup was thought to be less than optimal for hard driving. We have to say this particular car has coilovers. It has retrofitted the limited slip diff, which most of these had. So even, I think after the second year of production, Alfa put them in a standard, and you could get them from the dealer for only £350, I think. So they knew they'd made a mistake on that. So this is quite well set up, and it has the bigger front discs. So most of the issues that were criticised when it came out have been addressed on this. There is one thing, and I'll tell you more about it when I take it for a drive, and that is that the ride to sort of the ride handling balance just isn't right, and I don't think it's just on this particular car. So the Alfa it's an appealing little beast. It's got some big faults, but I don't know, I really do love it. So despite the limited slip diff that it has at the front, it does still suffer from torque steer, and depending on how bumpy the road is and what position, you know, what you're doing with the car, it can be quite pronounced. And that, I have to admit, has been made slightly worse because I have put spacers on it, and that will accentuate torque steer. However, in my view, it's completely worth it with the spacers. They give the steering a little bit more positivity and a bit more feel. Anyway, more generally back to the Alfa. This engine, you know, I've said it till I'm blue in the face, but it's just sensational. It really is just amazing. It's torquey, it's revvy, it sounds great. It is absolutely the dog's knackers. It is brilliant, and it makes up for a lot of sins. If I could change anything about the Alfa, it would be the way it rides. And it's not so much that bothers me that it's stiff, it's just that I don't think it needs to be. And if you're really going for it on a really bumpy road, you can feel it skipping, especially the back end. Let's go back to the good stuff. I think it looks sensational. It looks brilliant. I mean, it's just got that really wide stance, got the blistered arches. You know, for a little hatch, it's just awesome. You know, it looks great, it looks interesting. All the modern stuff is so boring now, and this is just got a bit more sense of fun in it, and that continues through to the way it drives. I've already talked about the engine. I think it's brilliant. It's so easy to blip it and heel and toe because it's so responsive and it really wants to work with you. And that carries through to the way it steers. It's so pointy. Some of you quite rightly pointed out in the other video that it has 1.7 turns lock to lock. I think I said 2.5, I don't know why. But it makes it so much fun, and quite importantly, it makes it fun even if you're not absolutely tearing, you know, the crap out of it. It goes, it's fun anyway because it's pointy, because you can feel it. You can feel what it's doing, and you can place it quite precisely too. Now if we look at the interior, it looks quite nice at first glance, but I have to admit, it really doesn't measure up to what the interior in that Beamer is. A lot nicer. But I can't believe that Beamer is going to be as much fun as this is. So yeah, the ride, if it could be improved, the general, you know, the way it handles bumps, let's call it, if that could be improved, I'd be happy with that. And also, a slight reduction in torque steer. Although it's not terrible, and sometimes it doesn't do it at all, and sometimes it does. It's a bit of a variable, which is what I don't like about it, because the torque steer is a little bit unpredictable. Now, when I compared this to the M135, I was shocked at how much I disliked my old car. I'm hoping today that this 130 can address some of those issues. Firstly, the engine is naturally aspirated, so in theory, it's going to be a bit more fun to play with. It may not be a torque monster like the other engine was, but at least it'll be fun. The other thing I'm quite hopeful about is that the steering won't be quite as woeful as it was on the 135. So I was disappointed to hear that it is actually electric. It's not a hydraulic system, but it isn't variable rate. So fingers crossed it won't be quite as bad, but it's going to be interesting because I think that for someone who's who's passionate about driving, this is a chance for BMW to redeem itself a little bit, because their more modern offerings for me just can't do it. Well, getting into the Beamer is a bit of a culture shock. It's so much more, well, it's so much nicer. The design isn't. The design's nice, but it's not quite as entertaining as the interior on the Alfa. Having said that, it's also so much better built. The materials, everything else. This car has 150,000 miles on the clock, and there is no way you would tell that from looking at the interior. My Alfa, the GTA, has 75,000 miles, and the interior is worn. It really is worn. This is quite an impressive place to be. Something else about the little Beamer is that I remembered them as being really quite ugly. And yet I saw this and I thought, well, actually, hold on a minute. That's quite nice looking. I don't know what's happened. Well, firstly, this is a 2-door version, which is much prettier, I think, than the 5-door. But on top of that, I think that time has been kind to what was originally a design that people were a bit unsure about. When it first came out, the 1 Series was a revelation. Up till then, all hatches were front-wheel drive, like mass or commercial hatches. Front-wheel drive, or at best you'd get 4-wheel drive. A rear-wheel drive hatch was a complete novelty. And it meant that BMW could get away with putting big engines in cars like this without them handling like complete pieces of poo. The front drivers at the time as well didn't have limited slip diffs fitted. So if they had too much power, they just tended to be pretty dreadful to drive, something that didn't affect these quite as much. But let's get down to it. So how does it drive? Well, it's far more grown up. It's more like someone in their late teens who's in the library at uni doing some research, compared to a toddler stomping around a room with a rattle, which is what the Alfa is. So it's much less flustered and much more composed than the GTA. It rides miles better. There is a bit of an issue. The steering still isn't up to scratch. It's lacking in feel and it's a bit vague. It is definitely better than the steering on that 135, possibly just because at least it's not variable rate, so you know what it's doing.
So this has a 3-litre straight 6. Perfect power plant to get in any BMW. They call it the N52, and it's one of the last naturally aspirated old school engines that Beamer made, and I think it's one of their absolute best. So your power output, 265 brake, torque about 230 pound-feet, revs to about 7,000 RPM, so it's a little bit more rev happy than the old M54 unit you had in the old E46, 330ci, and so on and so forth.
Definitely feels nowhere near as quick as the Alfa. I know mine's been tricked up slightly with the manifolds and the chip, so it might have a few more horses, so say 270, maximum 280, 250 a standard. This is supposed to have 270, so they're supposed to be about the same, but the Alfa feels noticeably quicker. Also, the engine is happy to do whatever you want. It's torquey, it will rev, but it is not a patch on the Alfa V6. It is pretty responsive, but it's not quite as sharp, and it's very linear, which you would say is a good thing, and it certainly is in some situations, but it's just, yeah, it doesn't have the life, it doesn't have the personality of the Busso. So although, yeah, great engine, prefer it to the 135 engine just because it's not turbocharged, it's a little bit more entertaining, a little bit easier to modulate, but not spectacular, certainly not after the Alfa. You know, handling wise, it's a better handling car, and it's you know, the Alfa, the chassis is so flawed, it skips about, it's hard. You know, this is better. This is definitely better, and it is entertaining enough. It's nice. You do get, the front end is still quite pointy. It doesn't have the immediate razor sharp response that the GTA has, but it is, you know, it is sharp enough. Gear change is a little bit notchy. It's hard to compare with the Alfa because the Alfa's one is worn, but I think this is shorter throw, quite notchy, but nice, nicer to use. It's nicely balanced in a corner, and you just can't get away with it. A front-wheel drive car, no matter whether you have a limited slip and so on, you know, it can be all right, and it can have a lot of grip in corners, but you're never going to get that sense of balance and adjustability that you do with something like this. This doesn't have a limited slip diff, and still, it's very good. So, to sum up, I have to say that it's a much, much tighter contest than it was with the 135. This doesn't have the pointy aggression and the amazing engine and the Busso. But it is a really good car. It is a lot better than the GTA, and if you told me now to pick between the two, I honestly don't know what I would have to say, because to drive down the road, although it's flawed, the Alfa is more entertaining. Although just ultimately not as able as this is, but it is more entertaining. But it's not that gulf that there was, you know, with the more modern Beamer. It's a much closer run thing. This is nice too, and it has suspension that works. So you get it gets a slight bit of lean into the corner as you turn, an initial bit of lean, which is actually quite nice. It's not uncontrolled or anything, but it's just kind of telling you what the car's doing. The Alfa corners much more flatly with those coilovers. This is a really impressive car. I really, really like it. It might be too grown up for me. I might need that the neurotic character of the Alfa. But one thing I wouldn't miss about the Alfa at all, aside from the ride, is just the interior. This is just a nicer place to be. It feels quality. It doesn't feel like things are going to come off in your hands. And, you know, in the Alfa, the switch gear, all that stuff, it's just, it's much nicer. But anyway, on that confused ending, thank you all so much for watching. Please, if you haven't seen it already, most of you probably will, do check out JayEmm's channel. I'll put the link in the video description. He's a great guy, and I don't know anyone who knows as much about cars as he does. And he's a great presenter, so have a look at his channel. Thank you very much for watching. Happy Christmas, and please do subscribe to the channel here and to my Instagram. Thank you very much, and see you for the next video.